Hello, everyone.
We are back with a new episode.
This is episode 22.
Of Talk to the Chip, yes.
Yes. And all the music we referred to and all the links, all our research, you'll find all the links on the podcast info.
Today, we are going to talk about a pioneering electronic music composer from Japan, a woman.
Yes.
Michiko Toyama.
Yes. Michiko Toyama. Well, actually, if the Japanese
Toyama Michiko.
Exactly, the classic way to pronounce most names from that part of the world is you put the family name first and then the individual's name afterwards. So it's Toyama Michiko.
Okay, Toyama Michiko. That's we will talk about her today. She was one of the first women to be invited to study at the legendary Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center. So today we are going to talk about her work, Waka.
Well, there isn't a huge amount of her pieces available, and two of them involve electronics. One of them is Waka, which is her first piece that she recorded at the Columbia University studio, the Columbia Princeton studio, in 1950, I think. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is how kind of gentle it is, how little electronics she's actually used.
Exactly. This is
very restrained.
A lot more about poetry and almost like text-based sound art compositions.
Absolutely. That's really her thing.
And I wait on Matsuo Beach in the calm of evening. And
Waka is the Japanese name for short poetry, basically. Mm-hmm. And Waka has really now become connected to a particular form of poetry, and these are the poems that she's used for this piece and translated into English as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's like it's also very fortunate that we are able to access this, because in 1960, when she released Waka, she was actually rejected for a Rockefeller Foundation grant to build her own electronic music studio. She wanted to build her own electronic music studio, so there could have been more explorations of her electronic adventures. So that reveals a lot about like what she could have done or couldn't do.
Well, there's a important history of sexism involved in all of this, I think. I mean, you know, with female Japanese artists in general, it's not that they don't exist, it's just that they don't get the exposure. You know, so across all the arts, there's as many women as men involved, but the men get the leg up, get the advantage, get the exposure, get the grants, get the connections to society, to exposure. And this I think this is what we find here, but I think more interestingly, in a way, with her work, with Toyama's work, is the fact that she's Japanese American. So she was born in the States in 1908, but I did see somewhere that her birth date was 1913. So maybe she was a lady has the prerogative to be. Imaginative about
we can't find much information about her, nor about the pieces, because the program notes are quite brief, and I mean, again, we need to. This is yet another reason to go to Japan and investigate some Japanese resources, because even if she was born there in the States, she eventually went back to Japan.
I mean, interestingly, she even though she was in Colombia and she studied with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and Messiaen and Darius Milhaud, all these interesting people from that period. She did go back ended up back in Japan. And she worked in Osaka and then in Kyoto as well, I think.
So when she went back there, instead of electronic music, her focus was acoustic research rather than composition. but definitely like the Rockefeller rejection changed that direction. Otherwise, we could have maybe had more access to more of the things she could have created along with the other pioneers in Colombia's Princeton Electronic Music Studio. However, we can now cover this album to basically remind and pay tribute Waka and Other Compositions, because this basically exhibits tape work, tape aesthetics.
Tape aesthetics, spatialization, and filtering.
Filtering.
Used quite subtly.
But also they almost emulate. What is your say in it?
Mm-hmm.
The electronic elements or all these elements, they emulate traditional Japanese instrumentation.
What's going on is that it's musique concrète in the sense that she's used recordings of traditional Japanese instruments, and the instruments that she's chosen are all from the instrumentarium, the instruments that are used in gagaku.
The dawn comes through the cracks of the shutters, heartless as night.
So just to go a bit through a bit of a glossary, Waka, the choice of the lyrics she's chosen here, the word wa at the beginning is the old name for Japan, like the ancient name for Japan. So waka is basically Japanese poetry or Japanese songs.
She worked on these in the 1950s, and this is her only album.
And gagaku, which is also the big influence in all her music, is the court music of the Japanese court from the Nara period, even a bit earlier, which is fascinating historically and in a musicological sense, and even in an anthropological sense, because they say it initially came from China, but actually Nara in the 7th century onwards, in the 7th century, was the most eastern end of the Silk Road. So when you look at gagaku, it shows elements as a sort of a treasure chest of cultures from all the way along the Silk Road. So there's Indian aspects in gagaku, there's Chinese, Korean.
So not just Japanese.
Not just Japanese. And now, of course, like everything else foreign that ends up in Japan, it became Japanified very, very quickly. So not very, very quickly in historical terms, quickly over a couple of 100 years. So now it's something that's kind of completely Japanese, and still, if you dig into it, you can find artifacts from cultures all the way along the Silk Road in gagaku.
Well, that's very fortunate that she was actually the first international composer to work in Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Studio, and probably one of the first women there.
She was the first woman, I think.
I think so, but definitely the first international person. It's also so. This is like that was in 1956.
Yes.
She was basically studying there. And that was when she could also dubbed the Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center, and then that's where she could actually record this as an album. This is currently called Computer Music Center. It still exists, obviously. Yes. We've talked about that on many occasions.
It keeps coming up. It's such a central point in electronic music history at Columbia, Princeton studio.
Yeah, when we talked about Laura Spiegel, and obviously whenever we made all our references to the likes of Vladimir Ochevsky, who refused Hurricane, that we covered in our episode
Otto Lernig,
yes. And obviously John Cage. Yeah. So that's where she was. She was in this massively important electronic music hub.
But interesting, you know, that
experimental approaches
that she was
and electronic music.
She was Japanese American, and she was obviously got a lot of support in some respects from American institutions. Yeah. But she was in the 1940s. She was a victim of the American concentration camps for Japanese people. She was put in a concentration camp on the West Coast. It's a story that's not really well known, but Japanese people were rounded up, and there has always been a big Japanese population in the Western US, well, particularly California, Hawaii, Los Angeles, San Francisco. And they were all rounded up and put into concentration camps in the 1940s after Pearl Harbor. And one of America's greatest photographers, Dorothea Lange, documented this and took some fantastic photographs. We'll put the link in the text. And these photographs were banned by the US government for many years because they didn't want anyone to know about the conditions that Japanese people were kept in, basically to keep the moral upper hand against the Nazis and their concentration camps. Of course, most of the Japanese people that were put into camps in California did survive. They weren't extermination camps, but nevertheless, it's quite a dark period that she survived. So you can understand her weird kind of ambivalence to American culture, and in some respects that she was a victim of it, which I think is quite a fascinating thing with her work. In that, you know, the Japanese musical origins of everything is very, very clear, but it is translated into English. And then I thought what was really interesting in the very beginning of Waka, there's a very prominent flute part, and it sounds quite jazzy. It's it's not that's not Japanese music. You know, it's
American.
Yeah, very, and you know, with jazz, of course, we're talking about a big African American influence. So this is her work is a product of a big social and cultural mix and cultural exchange. I think, which is really interesting to follow the lines in it all.
I'm going to link this very, very new, fresh article about her. Probably this is one of the most extensive writings I have found out about her. But it's not just that. This mentions a lot of details about Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Studio, including her being prior to the history that Vladimir Ochevsky was seeking to establish. Basically, this is published as online by Cambridge University Press. Bridget Cohen wrote this article. Michiko Toyama disrupts the historiography of modernism. So this would be a great follow-up read. For as part of this podcast, because it tells a lot about the intersections of Japanese and Western instruments and the electronic approach and the modernist approach, which centers around her music. Basically.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that we had a podcast episode about Stockhausen's Telemusic, one of the first ones we did.
That's the very first one, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, for a German composer in the early mid 20th century, Japanese music was so foreign. It was modernity. But what we're actually talking about here is something with very, very ancient roots. It's not. This is anything but with her works. This is anything but turning her back on the past and going forward into modernity. This is really about finding a new interpretations of very, very ancient music.
Yeah, like the electronic sounds, which are not many. Like mainly when I listened to the album on Bandcamp, it was almost like listening to an experimental spoken word compilation of music defined by Japanese instrumentation. But the electronic effects resemble so much to like the Japanese mouth organ, and they're not always noticeable in that sense also, right?
Well, it's like her piece Aoi no Ue.
Sorry?
Aoi no Ue.
That's a very good
Princess Hollyhock.
Okay.
And that's her longer electronic piece. That's like 7 minutes 50, which is based on a No play. No theatre is one of the most ancient and one of the most, specialized form of Japanese theatre. And it's a story from Murasaki's Tale of Genji, which is one of the great works of literature worldwide, from the year, I think it was first published in 1004.
Oh, wow.
But written by a woman. So it's a woman's point of view of courtly life in Japan in what was pre-Middle Ages here. Tang Dynasty, I think it was, in China, just before the Song Dynasty. And so that piece is, a story from 1004, which then became the basis of a No play, and then Toyama has taken the No play and based her piece on that.
Wow!
And it's ghostly as well. There's one of the main character, the princess in the story, in the No play, isn't played by a person. It's just played by just her tunic on a stand. So it's about absence, really. And I think she's using the electronics in that to suggest this kind of extra distance of basically make it more spooky. But it's not modernity. It's about really exploring something that existed already.
She's exploring acoustic means, including breathing. She had a very, very experimental approach. I think we could very well call her a sound art pioneer in that sense.
Yeah. Well, but also in that, breathing is a really important thing in Japanese music.
Kazaiki, breath noise. That's mentioned.
I didn't know the name of it, but if you listen to shakuhachi, the seven-hole flute, the amount of pitches you can get from it, it's only pentatonic. It's only pentatonic.
Shakuhachi.
Shakuhachi, yes.
Shakuhachi, yeah.
And the shakuhachi is quite simple in terms of you can't get that many notes from it. So all the complexity and the profound complexity comes in the sound generation, the amount of breath noise that's mixed in with each note, and how the breath noise depicts different seasons and different forces of nature.
So
it's very, very emotive. It can be very touching.
Could we please say maybe like when she returned to Japan? Well, she had to. It was almost like all these things that disrupted her life beyond her control. When she returned to Japan, she embarked on acoustic research.
Yeah.
Could we then say that this complexity of these acoustic aesthetics, including the breath noise, is a result of being in Japan? Because you're telling me like this language has symbols and elements that are associated with nature and voice.
Always,
this depiction.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. The Japanese character we mentioned for Waka. It's really nice if you get the chance to look. We'll put a link to this also in the notes. But if you look at the Japanese character for Waka, Wa is made up of what they call radicals, two parts. One is a wheat field or just wheat, and next to it is the mouth. And so it's the symbol for harmony, because it's two things that work together. And then Ka in this case is the character for song, Uta, usually pronounced Uta, and you can see like open mouths. There's two open mouths on the side of it. So it's you can really see the ancient cultural roots in every word that you use in a language like Japanese.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It could have been very good if we could access these talks she gave, like in 1988. Apparently, she gave a talk at the Acoustical Society of America, which basically was about her acoustic research. And also, when she was in Tokyo, working in the University of Tokyo at the Department of Information Science and the Radio Research Laboratory.
Oh, wow.
There's so much to unearth
here
that we can only, try to mention very quickly, I guess.
I would really recommend to everyone to really listen to some good recordings of, particularly to go live to a performance of shakuhachi.
She was not super reluctant to share her work also. So, yeah.
Well, the thing about, there was a quote from
she was very reluctant.
Self-effacing. And that's another, that's very, very Japanese character. Japanese artists are, you can talk to someone who has had thousands of performances and exhibitions and whatever, and they're like, oh, me, little me? Oh, no, it's not, I'm not an artist. I wouldn't consider myself an artist. Okay. So there's a very culturally enforced self-effacement.
But also there, on top of that, she basically faced professional obstacles.
Yes.
Here, so that's combine. When you combine all of that, it's basically we are talking about an artistic career that was not unearthed much.
So hopefully this will be a chance for people to discover Michiko's fantastic work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.